Our mics are on. Okay, I'm just going to dive in. And as a person who's only ever watched 2 boxing matches, Rocky 1 and Rocky 2, unless Peaky Blinders and all that counts, I have to say I was totally into it. And so I want to ask about this idea of how you managed to write and what challenges you thought you might face writing a character there in Pet Pet Slap, the new novel, which is we'll get to this, but it's a prequel to Pillow, in which the protagonist of Pet Pet Slap is first met, who is Pillow Fist Pete, Pillow Fist Wilson. So there's much more boxing in the new novel. And how did you calibrate the amount of boxing and balance it so finely with the existential and metaphysical and humor concerns of the rest of the story?
Yeah. I think the thing for me in boxing, well, a main thing to know, I think, for Pet Pet Slap is I wrote it like dead in the middle of like lockdown pandemic, where I was just exercising like a lunatic to not go crazy. So I including like I set up like a double end bag in my apartment and like kind of ruined the ceiling and lost my deposit for that in Nova Scotia. But so I was like exercising using sort of boxing things, because you can do it by yourself, shadow boxing, things like that. So that influenced me to sort of put it more at the foreground for Pet Pet Slap, I think. And but also I just think in general, like boxing lends itself much better to fiction and artistic representations than it kind of has play as a sport, because you have a protagonist. There's one guy, you can follow him. You're not trying to write like about a basketball team or something. But yeah, so I think that for me, especially with Pet Pet Slap, what I was thinking about was the basic premise, not to give too much away here.
Yeah, we're going to be really careful of spoilers. Like,
sure.
There's lots to talk about without...
Who's to say what actually happens? But like my premise was a underdog sports narrative where the person is an underdog because they don't try that hard and then they cheat and win anyway. That was kind of the premise. Yeah.
Okay, but the level of detail about boxing and just things like, okay, this detail, he's trying to make weight, and his trainer scrapes sweat off his body with a credit card. And then he has this tear, and she scraped every little bit as weight, right? And then like details like that. I mean, I guess you have to know boxing, but also none of the stuff about boxing feels like research. It's all channeled through his voice and personality, and it never feels like, oh, this author's done so much research about boxing.
It would never feel like that.
But did you do a ton of research? I mean, or do you know this stuff? Are you a fan?
Yeah, I'm a fan. So like, I did research in the form of, watching a lot of boxing on YouTube, which is decent research. But yeah, I think that's the other thing about boxing in the sort of fictional space is there are a lot of sort of those interesting sort of metaphorical spaces. There's a lot of like action like that. And a lot of what I think, like in Pillow, it's more of the sort of interesting sort of side pieces of boxing. And then for Pet Pet Slap, it's more direct because he's actually in his career at that point. But yeah, like things like, like that, they literally sort of like boil 10 pounds off themselves and then compete is like, I think it's for me, it's a rich artistic space. And it's also, at this point, probably my favorite sport. And like, I don't know, it feels like it's very difficult to follow a lot of sports now. You have to keep track of all kinds of things. And boxing is like more of a phenomenological event once in a while. Every 4 months, there's an interesting fight. You can kind of just watch it. And move on.
But there's so much more in here.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'll talk about the characters in a sec, but I want to talk about let's talk about the animals first, because in Pillow has, he loves animals, animals. He has at the beginning, he has a sloth, sloth buddy, Jersey Joe. He's got a shark, Rigoberto. And then but in both books, there's a giraffe on the cover of Pillow, but there's amazing scenes with a giraffe called Gentleman Jim, who is female, in Pet Pet Slap. So something about, what is it about giraffes and zoos, and you've imbued, it gives your character so much, but you've imbued him with this love of animals, which makes you fall for him, right? Like any reader who loves animals as well.
Yeah, that was combining two interests. It's very common boxer trope to have insane exotic pets. Notably, Mike Tyson had a pet tiger in his house. There's some very scary YouTube videos of him wrestling a tiger, if you want to check those out. But the zoo thing came about with Pillow. I was in grad school at U of T when I was writing the book, and I just went to the zoo with my friends, and then was like childishly enraptured with how fun the zoo was. Yeah, and I was just, I don't know, I literally had like an 8-year-old boy's reaction to going to the zoo for the first time as an adult. And so I just kind of put it in the book, and I thought it tied things together also nicely with like the surrealist elements of the book, which, you know, like a giraffe is a very surreal animal, especially when you see them at the zoo in real life.
The tongue, the
giant.
But I learned things even about giraffes in this book. And
I did look up some giraffe
beautiful scene
facts.
of a giraffe playing with a ball and kicking the ball, and he's it's just gorgeous. The giraffe stuff, and the giraffe is sad.
Giraffe is sad, yeah.
The giraffe is super sad.
In captivity.
It's a depressed giraffe, basically.
Yeah.
Which is very poignant.
Yeah, well, I think that I also think there's a sort of connection between the zoo particularly and boxing and him owning animals and boxing, right? Because there's a similar sort of thing of like, you know, the zoo and owning exotic pets and watching people sort of fist fight and injure themselves for money are all sort of morally wrong things that I think there is like a lot of beauty in it. You can have a transcendent experience with. So I think that I was interested in kind of that level of like, it's not like a virtuous pastime to go to the zoo or watch a boxing match, but there's
punch someone out for a living.
Exactly. Yeah, these things are wrong, but there are things I also like enjoy and I think finding sort of like meaning in those kind of sketchy spaces.
And so there an element of both these books is Andrew importing or borrowing or reconfiguring.
Plagiarizing would be another word.
In stealing, no. In the first case, living people who lived, characters in history, famous surrealists, and a couple of them pop up in the new book as well. But in Pet Pet Slap, then you take famous fictional figures like Sherlock Holmes and Arsène Lupin. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to pronounce it. Is it Lupin?
Lupin.
I should know from watching the show, but and they become characters in the novel. So that's a whole other level. So you've got famous surrealists mixing with fictional detectives, and then mixing with fictional people that are your own. So there's all this. Mm-hmm. But it's not complicated.
In hindsight, it does sound confusing.
I'm making it sound insanely complicated. It's quite madcap and funny, like hysterically funny and very smart, except for the sad giraffe bits. But the rest is very, very funny. So this initial idea of taking the surrealists and using them, and then using Sherlock. Sherlock is Pillow's roommate.
Yeah.
In Pet Pet Slap, and
Sherlock Holmes is a great roommate.
an in-house chemist.
Yeah. Yeah, so for Pillow, the initial thing was it was a grad school book. I was in grad school, so I was taking a surrealist film class. And what was really interesting to me about that was that the 20s surrealists, the Bretonian surrealists, like did go around as kind of a weird gang of strange young men who would do like public stunts and, low-key Marxist terrorist type stuff. So there was an element of them kind of being like a criminal gang a little bit. And that was the basic premise, was to like write a crime novel where the criminal organization was just all those French surrealists. And the other reason I thought I could do that,
genius, because then then the dialogue just writes itself. Well, it doesn't write itself, but
somebody else wrote it in 1925. But you could just take it. It's out of copyright. But the other thing is that in surrealism, in the manifesto of surrealism, there's a whole section, like they specifically were into the idea of part of the surrealist movement being able to just take and appropriate things and people into surrealism. There's a literal like list in the manifesto of surrealism where he lists like different writers and the way in which they're surrealist. So Swift is surreal in Malice or whatever. And so it's a whole list. Hugo is surrealist when he's not stupid, is one of them. They're not very nice people. But so that was also a technique of surrealism, is to just like grab things and throw them into your project, and you can use them however you want. So I felt not bad stealing vast swaths of surrealist writing. I don't know where else I was going.
You turn two of the surrealists, male surrealists. One of the best characters. This character appears in both the books. Is Gwyn pronounce for me.
Apollinaire.
Apollinaire. You turn him into a woman, and she's a fantastic character. I have more to say about her in a moment.
If I was strict with him, it would have been a bit of a sausage party. They were all just angry young Frenchmen, so you got to kind of like vary it a little bit.
Except for the love interests in kind of semi-love interests in one of the books. The women, like Kim the trainer and Gwyn, like they're like as pretty hard asses the guys, right?
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think so.
They get away with stuff.
Yeah.
What about Sherlock, though?
Sherlock, yeah. So I would say, going on that list, this is what I was going to say earlier, I forgot. So I think Sherlock Holmes is surrealist in friendship. That was all. Like I like Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is a great character, but I always really think the best part of Sherlock Holmes is not. Like, I'm a big Sherlock Holmes short story fan, the little short stories as opposed to the novels, because that's a lot of it where he's just hanging. It's just him and Watson like hanging out in their bachelor apartment. There's this sort of beautiful homosocial space where, Sherlock Holmes is like just shooting cocaine and talking all kinds of nonsense, and Watson is sort of patiently waiting for him. So I was excited to work with Sherlock Holmes. And I also think that like there's a central sort of tension between like the most sort of like the sort of cultural meme of Sherlock Holmes, which is related a lot to like deduction and the scientific method and things. But I think that when you actually read the sort of actual text of that, it's often there's a lot of tension against that sort of way of being, and a lot of the most sort of endearing or memorable Sherlock Holmes things are completely unrelated to that sort of deductive reasoning idea. They're like the Baker Street Boys, and like him just like sort of putting on disguises.
I have
and
like
things.
the collected Arthur Conan Doyle.
Yeah,
I've read
they're great.
all the Sherlock stories and novellas like more
Yeah.
than once. So
and like importantly, like Arthur Conan Doyle is not Sherlock. Like Sherlock Holmes is based on his professor. He's kind of Watson, if anybody. And also like Arthur Conan Doyle would then go on to like get really into like ESP
seances
and
stuff,
seances and all that kind of stuff. So he really was not this like,
he was woo woo.
yeah,
like
he was extremely woo woo. Like he was a bad doctor for a while, but like it's a 19th century doctor. It's not like, you know, it's a different era of medicine.
I should have mentioned off the top. We are going to have time for questions. So if anything comes to mind, keep it here because we're going to make some time for that. And Andrew is going to read a bit. But I just, while we're on this thing of the characters, I'd finish one more thing and then we segue. And so my burning question is, because I wrote a note saying, several post-it notes, and this isn't one of those.
You should see the post-it notes set up.
It should. I was like, this has to be a movie. This has to be a movie. Not in that way where people say, oh, the book's written as if the author, you know, is already, you know, thinking of the option. Just because it's like, it's got plot, it's got character. They've got plot, character, like cinematic, like scenes are crazy. The dialogue is amazing. Like it's a no-brainer. So I'm like, options? Has Hollywood come calling?
Has not.
And that's madness.
Yeah, I mean, you could think. I mean, I would say from a objective point of view, I have a fairly poorly managed literary career, and the strategy of releasing a prequel to a small press Canadian novel 8 years later. It's like you wouldn't game it out with your agent if you hadn't fired him. But yeah, I think one thing that might lead to that is like, you know, the sort of window dressing of my books is quirky, as they say. But I actually like follow a pretty square 3-act structure when I write.
That's what it is. Then you've got all the interesting stuff that TV loves these I see prestige TV.
Prestige TV.
Like you've already got season 1 and season 2 locked.
That's true.
And I've already started casting.
Okay, I want to hear the cast.
A few of my ideas. This one came to me. I didn't have to even. Just like I didn't even think it. Just Tilda Swinton as Gwyn Apollinaire.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
And I think Andre Breton. He's the mob boss in the first one, which happens later. If that makes any sense in time.
It does not, but
Andrew time.
That's what I did.
Is Steve Buscemi.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
And
this is good.
Antonin Artaud, and Joaquin Phoenix.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't want to belabor the point, but those,
those are all good.
It's already a stacked cast. So you're going to give us a flavor, though,
of which? Oh, yeah.
I'm going to read. All right. Unless you have more casting suggestions.
No, I'm good. I don't think about. I don't think about these things. Allergic to money. So. Also, a note here is that I work here. I've done many events in this space, and I know what's really annoying when writers do them. And I'm looking at Dylan in the back right now. I kind of want to do all of them. I want to vary the mic. You know what I mean? I'm gonna do that. Throw it on there, you know. I don't know. It's just that's the
What are the other annoying things?
The little brother impulse in me. I could, if I was really feeling it, I would go to the podium to read. Change up the mic setup on him.
Or you'd shuffle around the book and have post-it notes and go, oh, there's another section.
Yeah, I would take a really long time saying things. You could do that one. All right, but I'm just gonna read from the beginning because it's easiest, and I'll read my epigraph like a dick. So this epigraph is from the great and recently deceased, unfortunately, boxer Pernell Whitaker. It says, I'm not worried. I know what I have to do. I'm going to go out here and dazzle myself. I'm going to surprise myself with how good I'm going to look. If you're lying flat on your back, snuggling your sloth best friend, the sloth will have this natural reaction of grasping his weird domed hands around the back of your head and sliding his face across your chin. Pill had asked the exotic animal dealer why, and it's because a sloth is stupid enough to keep hoping you're a tree, even if he knows you're not. Even as he listens to your heartbeat, a sloth is stupid and beautiful and hopeful enough to keep rubbing that chin in case it turns into a pear and a branch and a pear falls off. Pillow kissed the abrasive hair on his sloth's face. "What can I do, Jersey Joe?" The sloth stopped for a very long minute, as sloths do, and then pressed his head back down. "I'm sorry, Jersey Joe. I'm going to miss you so bad, and I'm so sorry." Pillow was in the middle of fucking up very badly. That was a thing he knew. The thing he didn't know was what exact thing he was fucking up. Anytime you're 8 weeks out from a professional fist fight and you're gacked out on pharmaceutical-grade cocaine, kissing a sloth on a couch worth more than your stock portfolio, your training camp is not going great. So sure, he was fucking up his training camp. That was obvious. But if he was fucking up his training camp, was he also fucking up his boxing career? And if you're fucking up your boxing career, you're fucking up your whole life. You're making yourself forget things that haven't happened yet. You're embarrassing yourself in a nursing home that hasn't been built yet in front of a sweet, sad nurse who hasn't been born yet. You're slurring words you haven't said yet, and you're already slurring the dull, sad insistence that you didn't just slur all the words you slurred. The boxer moved his face to the back of his sloth's neck and kissed the spot the sloth liked to be scratched. A kiss is different from a scratch in some very specific way important to sloths. Pillow scratched, and Jersey Joe yawned his giant circular head pleasurably toward the hand. Do you ever dream about being air? Just evaporating and then sitting in a room with everyone you love and just getting breathed in and out. Whoever's there, whoever comes, they can just breathe you in and out and then leave and breathe someone else. For a while, there was just silence and the sound a mansion makes when there are just 3 people and a sloth in it. I guess that was me telling you a secret, Jersey Joe, because I do. I dream that when I'm feeling good. There are a lot of ways to end up 8 weeks out from the last of your last shots against an Olympic gold medalist, 4 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier than you, out of shape, kissing your sloth best friend goodbye and starting to cry now. And which way you picked doesn't matter much. However you did it, you end up knowing you're saying goodbye because every day your sloth best friend spent with you was torture for him. Even as he hugs your face, you know it's only because he's too stupid to understand what you are, let alone how you are. Pillow loved animals. The weirder the better, and because he was a person who just one day, without even really meaning to, had enough money to fly to a private zoo in Tennessee and buy a sloth, and then fly to a mansion in Miami and buy a shark, and bring both animals home to his giant, empty house, Pillow had been able to spend every day with nature's sharpest, meanest, weirdest, and its meekest, slowest, and weirdest. And all it had done was remind Pillow that dreams can't come true. Either dreams are real right when you have them, or they're not. Jean Painlevé peeked his head around the door. Pillow, they can't wait any longer. Because he knew Jersey Joe didn't have the emotional capacity to be offended by it, Pillow yanked him by the fur collar so he could look one more time into the sloth's perfectly round, perfectly empty eyes. He just looked, which is mostly what you end up doing with animals. I'll miss you, Joe. I love you so much. Painlevé grabbed Jersey Joe under the sloth's long, creepy arms and pulled him off. Jersey Joe hooked those arms around Jean's face and nuzzled him, hoping this man was a tree and that this tree had fruit. You're doing the right thing, Pillow. He'll be happier. Pillow sat up and looked at the crisscrossing surgical scars across the top of his right hand, and then he used the hand to rub his fat, flat nose. In 4 hours, he was supposed to run 5 miles, and then he was supposed to drink a smoothie and do 1,000 sit-ups. He closed one eye because it felt like the right thing to do. Yeah. That's what we'll all be someday.
It's a nice introduction to the sort of metaphysical sadness of Pillow, but also the humor of the book.
That is a sad part.
And there's madcap stuff and violence later. So you mentioned Painlevé, Jean Painlevé in that. I actually thought you had made him up. This is me. Like, put up your hands if you've heard of Jean Painlevé. so I don't feel totally stupid. Woo!
Woo!
Woo! Okay.
0. That's
So
the goose
this
egg.
fascinating character, non-surrealist, surrealist.
Surrealist adjacent.
Yeah, surrealist adjacent Frenchman, aren't they all, kind of? And his wife, Genevieve,
Hamon.
who's a female filmmaker as well. So he was a zoological surrealism
Zoological
film.
surrealism,
Like, explain
yes.
this character. He appears all through the book, but when I Googled it, I went, oh my God, this is so crazy. There's a whole Criterion collection. And
Yeah, it's great.
how did I not
Strong.
know? Okay.
Well, how did not know is he's very obscure in not France. He's somewhat famous in France, but no. So Jean Painlevé. Well, to start off as a background, like the surrealists as a group were very cliquish and extreme in who they allowed to be members and what they did. So and by the end of it, there was many iterations of André Breton coming up with criteria to be a surrealist. You had to by the end, you had to be a Maoist or you weren't surrealist. But so Jean Painlevé was in the sort of social circle of surrealist, but he was not
artistically
a member.
surrealist,
Yes,
as opposed to manifestoli, maybe, or
yes, he did not sign the manifesto, so he's not surrealist. But Jean Painlevé makes, and again, it's on the Criterion Collection. They're amazing. Jean Painlevé made nature films where he got really cool footage of various animals, but it'll be a documentary about the mating habits of seahorses. And just the way that it's narrated kind of calls attention to sort of these surreal aspects of nature. And his sort of contention was that whereas surreal, capital S, surrealists were into the unconscious and dreams and that kind of stuff, Jean Painlevé was more about sort of finding those kind of the edges of reality in nature. And yet they're very beautiful films. There's one of them that plays a prominent part in my book, which is a medical film that he made, which is really wild, where it's about there's a French colonial doctor who invented a serum that would substitute for the connective functions of blood in your body. So
no spoilers, though.
No spoilers, but the film is they exsanguinate a dog and put this serum in it, and the dog is fine. Yeah.
Oh my God! Because I was just going to leave the room.
No, the dog's totally fine at the end.
I watch
It's
a movie,
insane.
and if the dog's going to die, I actually say to people, "There's a dog in this movie. Does the dog die?" And they're like, "The dog doesn't die." Okay, I'll watch it.
All the animals live.
But sorry, the one of the most beautiful scenes in the book is when Pillow has a wound, open gaping thing that happens to him, which I won't say how because it's more fun to read how that happens. It's not in the boxing ring. And Genevieve, Jean Painlevé's wife, does this thing. It's so beautiful. I have the page number written down. Because she does this thing with a sea anemone, and just the way you describe it is just fantastic. I just love this so much. So I'm going to do that irritating moderator flipping to the page.
Let's see. We might have an alternative solution.
Oh, here it is. Okay, and it's that's not it. Okay, hang on. Sorry. You banter. Okay, here it is. Okay. So she he's standing in the sea trench. Painlevé's gone with his big box camera to film something. Here's an example of. Anyway, it's just funny. I'm giggling to myself. Okay. Genevieve was back, having created a tide pool in her hands. Pillow saw she was holding a sea anemone, its green exterior peeled back to show 1,000 dangling pink tubes. Bring your cheek over here. You're going to put that on my face? Man, this is so beautiful. I'm here with a creature of the sea forest that will nestle itself lovingly onto you. You trust a dry thread tied around a dry needle held between two latex fingers to go through your face, but you don't trust this little cutie to suck you? This is the lovely part. Pillow crossed his arms, closed one eye. You put it like that. He dipped his head and exposed the cut. And Genevieve nestled the little anemone on, letting go as Pillow felt the odd, dry grip of the little wet tubes. Pulling back, Genevieve grinned, held up a finger. She took pictures. And then he goes to the water. And after a while, they sat down on a wet rock, and Genevieve firmly shoved his face into the water. After a couple of seconds, the little pink tubes gently released his face, and the anemone sank gratefully onto a rock, jostling in time with the tide. Anyway, it's just lovely, like, and then it's all healed up, sucked. It's just beautiful stuff.
Thank you.
Take these real life people, but again, there's no sense that there's research here. You create a fully fleshed human out of Pen LeVay's wife, and it's just works so nicely.
Thank you. I've kind of always been anti a certain kind of research for creative work in general.
Anti what?
A certain kind of research.
Oh.
Like, I think the research I did for these books and the research I believe in is like reading enough of something to get the vibe and like, you know, like get the sense of it. But like, I think often people get really tracked in on like factual research about things, and I mean, it's different strokes for different folks, but it's not generally the kind of fiction I
This
like.
very strong voice of your third person protagonist, and it's all funneled through his. So it
Correct.
it lands differently than
Yeah.
if it was just, even if it did sound researchy, it would sound different because it's him.
Well, I had a when we were in, it was copy edits. There was a query on the fact that teeth aren't bones, which I had to be like, I a grown man had to be like, well, actually, no, the guy I made up doesn't know that teeth are bones. So your correction is wrong, actually. And I also learned that teeth aren't bones from that interaction.
There's a scene like that in Pillow with the pickles.
Yes,
And-
that's another thing I learned that someone explained to me as a grown man.
He has a character say,
Yeah.
pickles or cucumbers, or like, what the fuck? Like,
Yeah. That also happened to me. Yeah. I had one ill-fitting year where I was a fellow at Massey College. Was not a good fit.
You wore a robe.
I did. It was not, that wasn't a good fit, but also like it was just a continuous series of like these awkward gathered dinners where I would step on these like knowledge rakes where I would like not know that pickles are cucumbers. I asked some guy one time, who was like genealogy, or I don't know, whatever. He did rocks. He studied rocks. I was like, what's in the center of the earth? That was I thought he would have it, and he was like iron. I was like, okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but anyways,
I thought it was
just
magma.
I thought so. I thought it was. I don't know. I guess it's molten.
Too many
I don't know.
sci-fi movies.
He did not further explain it. So yeah, that happened when I was writing Pillow. That was happening to me continuously. Was just me asking like childish questions about the world and Massey fellows shaming me.
I just had a heyday with. I'm a real fan of a good simile. I am one of these writers who I like language readers, but writer too, I guess. I like language that calls attention to itself. You know, you read those reviews and they praise the book because the language doesn't call attention to itself.
Oh yeah,
itself.
The sentences are so short they almost don't exist. So spare is the prose.
Why is that a good thing in my book? So anybody here, I'm sure there are some people here of the vintage of recalling or reading early Tom Robbins and Still Life with Woodpecker. That seminal book. And there's the princess, the redhead princess, and I just got so excited when I read that in my teens. It was like, or was I like 20? I don't know. I read it and it was like she has hair like iron ketchup, and I thought, oh my God, I've never read any, because you know, you're reading books that are supposed to be really literary, and you don't read things like that. And then you discovered Kurt Vonnegut and Tom Robbins, but so Andrew's similes. are just up there. Like I got to read you a few because I just love them. So this is Sherlock actually talking about Lupin, and he says, "A man who knows the artifice inherent in all complexity. His crimes are vast cauldrons of delicately layered soup, which boil down always to a thin skim of residual fat." There's so many. Oh, this one's crazy. I love this one. This is like, some people would find this over the top. I
You should
like
see how many we cut. There's a lot.
Sure. Pillow nodded, and something somewhere in his neck snapped and grinded like an axle falling off a wagon headed to Oregon a very long time ago. Now, you either love that kind of thing or you don't. So I'm going to give you a few more samplings, and then you're going to run and buy the book and get him to sign it. Oh God, this is so good. This is the golden boy he's going to be fighting. Julio Solis's lower abdominals look like a newborn mountain range. His obliques look like an ocean trench where they find fish who look like rocks and don't have eyes. And just when you think it can't get any better, Julio Solis's face looked like the feeling you get. So it looks like a feeling, looks like a feeling you get when someone explains something really complicated and you just wait and say, wow, when they're done. It's just like so much fun. So much fun. Do these things just come to you, or do you have to work for them?
Oh, the tortured. Yeah, they're. Yeah, it depends. I mean, I think like I don't know. I always feel like when I'm like sort of introducing characters or something, or there's like, there are moments where I'm like, yeah, I gotta kind of give it a little something here. But yeah, there were a lot cut. I think it just is also like a stylistic tick or affectation at this point. So yeah, there was a lot cut out. Oh yeah.
Here's one that's nicely subtle and so perfect. It's not back to Painlevé, because Painlevé raised both hands. He's been asked something like, "Are you really going to do blah blah blah?" But I'm not saying what blah 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 is because it's spoiler alert. Spoiler. Painlevé raised both hands, showing his palms as if his niece had caught him cheating at Monopoly. It's just like. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Questions?
Questions from the crowd?
I have more thoughts, but should we have questions?
You can cross. It's
You
okay.
may cross.
No, it's no problem.
You may cross. Yes. Have a good evening. Bye-bye. Okay. Oh, is it because I said the F word?
Okay. I said it like 8 times while I was reading.
Anybody have any questions for Andrew? Okay, we have one at the back and one at the front.
That bald guy has something.
That's more of a 3-part comment.
Oh, all right, there we are.
Oh,
there
no.
he is.
Everybody run for the exit.
Does that anatomy thing work? Does it actually heal?
It's completely made up. No, it's not bullshit. Yeah. No, that is a made up thing. Yeah.
What was the
The
question?
see an enemy thing, does it work?
Oh,
I would actually really strongly
may-
not recommend that. It's probably dangerous.
It's brilliant. I assumed it was real. So I assumed
That's made
Painlevé was made up, but as I read that, I assumed that was real.
No, that's made up.
Okay.
Yeah. They don't pay for those anymore. Publishing.
Okay. Guy in the front.
So on the topic of style, so Andrew and I were in creative writing program together, Concordia. And when I first started,
Concordia.
Yeah.
Oh.
Many years ago.
when I first started reading it, I was like, oh, it's Andrew. Like I recognize
Wow.
your style of writing and these little flourishes that you add in there, and these descriptions, a lot of like physical action stuff like that are kind of like, and I kind of think of like, I don't know if it was a conversation that happened to you, but you had said something like we were talking about Hemingway and how eventually he got kind of wrapped up in just writing like Hemingway. And so there's this kind of like, self-consciousness about his personal style. So, reading your book and recognizing your style from the short stories that you wrote like 15 years ago was like pretty cool. And I guess my question is, to what extent are you conscious of maintaining a certain style as you write?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think that for these, because these were connected books, like there's a narrative voice that I wanted to maintain between the two, which is sort of the third person close on pillow. So I like that in this book. I was conscious of like sort of matching it to my first book a little bit. In terms of a general style, I don't really think about sort of trying to match the style of a much, much less accomplished writer than Ernest Hemingway. But no, I think it's like in general, and especially now that I'm like, retired from professional writing in a certain way, like I think it's best to not to like just like have fun and try to be as natural as possible. I think as soon as you get into kind of trying too much, it's bad. That's what I'm sticking to.
But I think there's two things here, because there's the Hemingway seeming like a parody of Hemingway, like Tom Wolfe was great when he did his, and then his novels start sounding like he's being Tom Wolfe. But I think there's also the you recognize the voice, the writing, beyond the narrative, the narrator's voices and the characters. There is a writer's voice, and once you have a voice, like if you think of all your favorite writers, that you can read a paragraph without knowing, like blindly, and you would go, that's so and so, and that's so and so, and that's Laurie Moore, and that's so and so, and like you can do that, and that's really amazing that you have. It's a gift. It's a gift. Some people try and they never develop a voice and a style. So, because Martin Amis said a style is all a writer has.
I would agree with that. I think
like his style. He said that in a Paris review interview, and it just really stuck with me. As a style is all the writer really has. Like in the end.
Yeah, and I think in general, I think too. Like when I'm reading, like I want writing like with personality, like as we were talking about. Like I think, and also like I'm increasingly like averse to like super like clean prose, or like I really think that I really like I don't even like, at this point I don't even really like books or movies where like everything feels very intentional. Like I think that there should always be room in art for there to be like value in like what an artist like accidentally shows you or is not conscious of what they're doing.
Crack where the light gets.
Yeah, exactly. Or
and I think, poet.
Yeah. And I think when you sort of share art and publish it and stuff like that, that like that's kind of the reason to do that and not just keep it a nice hobby for yourself, is that you sort of expose yourself to that like audience participation and people kind of seeing and understanding things about your work that like you didn't mean to do. Yeah.
There's one at the back. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Good.
Do you think that question of style, because it's true, you do have a really consistent style. Like I haven't known you for as long as Concordia.
Almost pretty close. Yeah.
And it's true, like you are someone that if I ran across a book that you tried to write under a pseudonym, I'd be like, no, it's definitely Andrew. But do you think it's because it's such a like clean connection to actually how you perceive things? Not that you're like Pillow, I don't mean the character, like the character's really specific, but something about like the way you perceive the world, like which I think is something like, you know, having a strong sense of like a very kind of strong like BS detector, and you're very willing to like make fun of things, and you kind of can't help it, but also you do have that thing where you feel sad when things are sad.
Yeah.
But that to me is such a poor Andrew thing, where it's like this thing you're like
Being sad. Smiling but so sad inside.
But you're making fun of a sloth, you're saying he's stupid, it's so mean, but it's also
They are though.
you know,
Yeah.
being really like sloths are stupid, but being like the sloth has humility, you know? The kind of like, I don't know, it's like some sort of mix of like snarkiness and pathos, always, both of them, you get that, you know? And I think that's probably why it is kind of an organic thing. Anyway, my question was, it really was a three-part comment. My question was, do you think that there is like a connection for so many people when they're being organic about it between the way they perceive things and their style, and that's why it's maybe hard to fake?
Yeah, I think so. I think that you would hope so. Anyways, I think that like the other thing I would say, and this goes back to both of you who know me from a younger time, is like I think when you're a younger, or when I was a younger writer, anyways, I don't speak for other people, but like when I was not good at writing, and I was not good at writing really until like my first book, basically. Like a lot of writers sort of have like a period of writing like successful short stories and publishing them and winning contests and like that. And that never really happened. I didn't really have any notable writing success until my first book. And I think that like what was sort of the difference for me was that when I was younger and started writing, I was conscious of how I would be perceived based on what I was writing. And I think that, my writing got passably okay when I kind of was able to let that go and just actually sort of engage with what I wanted to say and how I was perceiving things, as opposed to sort of how I wanted to be perceived. And I think that also goes back to like, the people aping their own style or things, is like, I think as soon as you start thinking about how people will think about you as the writer of something, it corrupts that sort of connection to how you perceive things.
We have time for one more comment
question.
Comment slash
go.
question. Anybody else? Yep.
Slap and Mary Vancouver seem like they have some type of connection just genetically. I was wondering if there's a connection for you between the books, either explicitly or just implicitly.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think. Well, I mean, I think I did, sort of belatedly discover like the rule of threes. Like that's a good kind of way to do things. 3 words in a row. In terms of it, I hadn't really thought about an explicit connection between those 2 books. Like Mary Van Kill's kind of an outlier between the Pillow books. I think. I don't know. I'll think about that one more. I had literally not thought about that, so that's a good question. And there was no comment as well, which is good. But also, I'll make one more comment actually, which is that like, I think in all this talk of style and whatever, I think like something I just would like to say is that like in my time at the library, I've been working with the Indigenous storytellers in residence the last couple of years, and I think that this book predates, most of the writing of this book predates that. But I think if anything is going to like really change fundamentally how I do things, it would be that work and that sort of getting that perspective on storytelling in a different way. Like when Les was the storyteller in residence here, he told the same story, the story of Watsik, like many times. I heard it many times, and sort of I think hearing and my understanding of it kind of grew and evolved. And I think sort of having that fundamental notion of like originality, which has always been like really a big part of my artistic life, and having that kind of fundamentally challenged in terms of storytelling, I think was a very powerful experience for me that I'm not sure how that's going to manifest in my own creative practice. But I don't know, I guess. That's just a thing I wanted to say in public. It's not related to anything we've talked about today, but.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And we have, thank you, Andrew. And we have books for sale by Crows. And Andrew is here with a pen I will lend him so he can sign books. And and the library closes at 8:30, but that's what I've been told. But please, slap. Pet slap. I didn't even ask you to explain that, but it's explained in the book.
It's in there.
It's in the book.
Yeah.
It's all in
3
the book.
words.
There's so much in these books. Okay, so thank you.
And thanks to everybody for coming. Everyone's here. Most people here are my friends, so thank you all for coming.